Kukutali Nature Preserve. It's on the Sound up north near the San Juan Islands, just past Anaortes, Washington State. I'm up here for the Skagit Valley tulips, but taking a break from the sunny fields to get out and paint the ocean a little bit. So I'm just walking around this little preserve. It's new to me. I've never been here before. The photos in Google Maps looked interesting, so I thought I'd give it a try. Looks like lots of wildlife here. Osprey, cormorants. That is Kikit Bay. And that is Similk Bay. This is Swinomish indigenous peoples' land. Beautiful area. This is what they call a pocket estuary. It says Swinomish ancestors used the tombolo, sand spit, as a canoe portage between Kikit and Similk Bays when weather was bad or when they were in a hurry. It saved them a laborious paddle around the western tip of Flagstaff Point. That sunlight sparkling on the water sure is pretty. I think I might try to find a scene like that to paint. I do love the smell of sun on the floor of a pine forest. It has a sweet, resiny smell that reminds me of camping when I was a kid. Takes me right back. So beautiful, deep and dark, cool here in the shade, in the forest. Little view of a rocky beach down there through the trees. I'm getting my exercise today after walking around about an hour and a half at the Tulip Festival. Now I'm out here hiking again. Can't help myself. It's been a nice but kind of rainy, cold winter, and it's just so nice to get out in the fresh air, the sunlight. Swinomish ancestors had close connections to Kukutali, for it provided many of their needs. At this place of cattail mats, there were seasonal villages where families gathered to harvest plants and food. The women collected cattails that they wove into sturdy mats. The men hunted elk by stretching nets made from nettle bark across the trails at nightfall. The sun on those madrona, I think those are madrona trees. Sure is pretty. Warm brown bark. Nice little picnic area. Oh, that's pretty across there. Oh, I can see Deception Pass Bridge way off in the distance, I think. Oh, this is so nice. And looks like here's the trail down to the beach. This is so nice here. Breeze off the water, a little bit of shade, nice flat grassy place to stand. I think this is where I'll set up and do a quick painting. Some of you may like to know what's in my backpack when I go plein air painting. I've got this new tripod. It's a carbon fiber, got it on sale. My wife actually got it for me for my birthday. It says the brand is a Geek Oto. I've got a Raymar wet panel carrier. These are really good. High quality, inexpensive wet panel carriers. Nice and light. So in this 11 by 14 I can carry 11 by 14 panels easily. But I can also carry smaller panels by taping them to an 11 by 14 inch board. So that duct tape comes in handy. I can paint a 9 by 12 or an 8 by 10 and then just tape it to an 11 by 14 inch board. And then I just use one carrier for up to an 11 by 14. Got my thermos of coffee, I've got my bottle of water, I've got my brush kit with an assorted set of brushes, some soft, some firm, some natural, some synthetic, and a couple palette knives. I also carry this back scratcher because it works as a good maul stick. You can extend it and hook it on the top of your panel to rest your hand on when you're painting. I also carry this iPhone flexible mount. I mount it to my tripod and then I can use that to hold my camera so I can quickly draw my composition. This flexible mast I got with my original Plein Air Pro kit, and it broke, but I repaired it. It's pretty nice. It's lightweight metal. I can hold my little extra palette on this lower clip, and I can hold my panel up here with this sidebar. And I usually throw a piece of tape across the top of the panel to hold it steady. I have my Day Tripper palette, and in a plastic sack I have some wet rags for wiping off my brushes, some paper towels, some gloves. I've got my wet paint carrier. I like this wet paint carrier. I got it on Amazon. It has a seal, a bunch of clips. The clips do break. I had to replace the first one after about 2 years, but what I like is that if I'm not going to be painting plein air every day, I can scrape the paint off my palette and put it back in the box and throw this box back into the freezer until I'm ready to plein air paint again. I always carry a roll of duct tape that comes really handy in a pinch. I've got a small can of artist turpentine and a larger can of Gamsol. A couple bungee cords. Got my large battery. I carry an extra tripod for the camera so I can film my plein air sessions for you and for me. These serve as kind of a nice reminder for me when I go to finish the painting in the studio. They remind me of the colors I was seeing that day and what really drew me to the scene. I've got some extra tubes of paint, my little mini palette cups with a little bit of Gamsol and liquid. I've got my paints laid out and still looking good from earlier, but I think I want to add just a little bit of Winsor Lemon yellow and some Winsor & Newton underpainting white, which is a titanium white that dries fast. I'll start by sketching the big shapes. To get the composition, I'll use a small brush with a little bit of burnt umber. This is roughly the composition I want to capture. I want to capture that foreground island, which will be pretty dark against the water. Maybe I'll try to capture that little sailboat that's floating out there off the side of that island. And then that next island, which I believe is Whidbey Island, with Deception Pass Bridge going off the side of the panel at about the upper 1/3 line. I may bring that little sailboat forward to make it more interesting and a little easier to paint. What's really drawn me to the scene is the sparkle on the water. I want to simplify that and I want to capture it somehow. That water is really hard to describe. Gray, lavender, tilted toward blue. It's a gradient of blues and lavenders in different directions. So it's tilting from a little bit yellowish blue on the left to more of a reddish blue on the right. And the far background is lighter than the middle ground, and the foreground is lighter than the middle ground. So I want to lay that gradient down, make it really smooth, and then lay in the sparkles on the water. And that'll be really the purpose of this painting, is to try to capture the beautiful sunlight on the water. After I sketch the composition, then I'll go with a turpentine wash. The turpentine wash, I think I'll go with mainly burnt umber and alizarin crimson today. I may tilt it a little bit with some orange in that foreground. Little island, a little bit of cad yellow, and maybe a little bit of Windsor lemon yellow on the beach as it comes closer to us. I've started to also carry a squeegee after hearing from Charlie Hunter, after seeing what he does with them. I think this may be a good place to do the squeegee. I'll try a little bit on the bridge in the far distance and on the water. The squeegee should give me a really flat edge of the water on the horizon, if I'm careful. I think that was partly successful. I hope I got that straight. It looks like it may be slightly tilted. I can correct that in the studio. found that since I'm painting on a linen panel, oh, I forgot to mention I'm using a Gorilla Painter linen, oil primed linen panel again. I got a few of those, trying that again. But I found when I tried to use the squeegee that because it is kind of warm out, the turpentine had already dried and set, so I wasn't really taking any paint away with the squeegee. But if I just re-wet the paint a little bit with some turpentine, then hit it with a squeegee, it came right off. Now I'll mix up a few colors. I'll start with the background sky and those far hills and work my way forward. I really want to keep those far hills gray and light, high in value, to push them back. Then the foreground little island will be slightly darker with a little more color, and the beach yet more so. The foreground beach will have more color and more contrast. And then I want to get into that water gradient. Here, since I'm mixing color in the shade, I need to be a little careful. I compare value to the white and the black I have down on my palette, and I compare color against the saturated hues of the colors I have on my palette and to the colors out in the scene that I'm seeing. But a little bit of it is guesswork because in the shadow it's going to be a little harder to judge value and color, so it's important just to get something down and to kind of go from there. Often you'll be pretty close, especially as you practice more. After I mix the color on my palette, then I shift it to that side palette to get it up off my mixing area. I can hold it on there then later and compare to it with my other colors as I mix them, or to take from those to make new colors. Now I've mixed up some pools. Of color. I'll dip into them with this big soft rosemary and co. It's a series 278. I think it's badger hair. It's nice and soft. It's a filbert. And I'll do the sky and those far hills. I'll use mostly the color that I pre-mixed, but I'll dip in here and there into full chroma color off my glass palette if I need to shift the colors a little bit one way or the other. As I'm painting the sky, I don't like to blend too much. I just want to put the color down and then leave it alone. But I do like to correct the shape of things as I'm putting in the background. So I see that when I'm looking out at those far islands, there's a little bit showing under the bridge, almost touching the other closer island. And to see there's some dips and some points, so I kind of add those as I go with the sky, and then I can come back in later and overlap that just a little bit when I paint the island in. That gives a nice soft edge. The secret to those far background hills, I think, is to keep it as poster-like, as flat as possible, but adding just slight value and color shifts to suggest detail, but don't try to paint the detail. Leave it very abstract. I want to mix the colors for that water gradient now. I want to make sure my palette is nice and clean. The water is really the center of interest on this painting. That beautiful, soft, electric lavender. I don't know how to describe it. It's really enchanting here in person. So I want to make sure I use clean colors. I want to make sure my glass palette is clean when I mix these colors so that they go down clean. I take just a little bit of Gamsol on a paper towel and wipe off my palette before I mix those colors. I also pick up any contaminated paint out of the colors on my palette. So this will be mainly blue, but I'm going to tilt it with a little bit of alizarin crimson. So I'll go with cobalt blue as the main color, and then tip it bluer with ultramarine blue, and tip it slightly warmer, redder with alizarin crimson. And then the highlights on the water are just almost pure white with a touch of Windsor lemon. So I'll go in and just put in a few of those at the end, probably with a palette knife so that I can keep that color nice and clean and not blend it with a brush. And then finally I'll paint that foreground beach. I want to do the water gradient first, get it down. It'll go down smoother and cleaner if I do the water first and then the beach after. I've got the colors mixed up for the water gradient. Here's some shades of lavender. I use a nice big clean brush. This is a Rosemary Evergreen long flat number 7. I could probably go a little bigger given the panel size, but this is the biggest one I have with me. So I'll just start to map that in. I'm going to try to avoid the areas where I want the nice bright highlights so I can put them in clean. Well, I have to say that was pretty satisfying, just to paint in that big gradient of lavender water, pushing it slightly green, slightly yellow, slightly red, slightly blue in different areas, but overall just a nice, smooth, flat plane. Kind of fun. Now I'll paint that beach in the foreground, and as it comes closer I'll bump up the contrast just a little bit, and then finally I'll try to throw in, well, I'll paint that boat too, which is just a kind of warm gray blob floating out there, sitting out there with no reflection I can tell in the water. So I'll drop that in as well, and then finally put some of the white yellow highlights, the glare, the sparkle on the water, which is just shifting and continually gorgeous. Close enough for now on that little sailboat. I may get rid of it later. It looks a little awkward, a little big there now. I'll clean my palette thoroughly again, and then white with just a little bit of yellow throw in some of those light sparkles that glare on the water. So now very carefully with a palette knife that I know pretty well, I'm going to lay in just a few smears of that glare on the water. Don't want to overdo it, I just want to hint at it. In the places where it works, I can leave it, and if I need to, I can correct it back in the studio later. Just the straight lemon yellow and white looked a little too cool to me, a little too cold, so I added a little bit of yellow ochre as well. Well, that's so much fun. It's really tempting to do too many. I'm going to stop now. I got the feeling, I got the colors. I can adjust it in the studio later after I look at it again under some better light. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it. Well, there's where it ended up. Yeah, I kind of like it. That was fun. Fun trying to capture that elusive lavender in the water. So beautiful. So striking in person here. It's amazing the colors you can see that the camera just does not pick up. Well, as usual, I'll take it back to the studio, take a look at it under some better light and touch it up a bit, put it out on my website. If you'd like to support the channel, then please like and subscribe. Jump over to my website and sign up for my newsletter. You can even jump over to Patreon and find some additional content there, more tutorials, questions and answers. As always, thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.